Hello, everyone. Let's see how we're doing here. Hi, everyone. Hi, guys. So good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to kick it off here. At some point, you may find yourself not on mute, so we can have a more intimate conversation about some of these things. If you've got background noise, just then mute yourself. We'll play it by ear. Is Marie Patrick here? There she is. Hi, Marie, our board chair. Would you like to kick us off, Marie? You might be on, oh, there you go.
Did you unmute me?
Yep.
Am I there?
Yes.
This is a whole new power Kay has to mute us. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I guess it's noon, so it can't be the morning anymore. Busy week for us at the Eastern Sierra Land Trust. Busy week for all of you joining us, and thank you for your support and your caring for our mission. As some of you probably know, I think it was a good 6 years ago, the Land Trust started working with the Hunewill Ranch, actually longer than that. I know Tony and Cheryl were involved for a long time. And recently, as Kay and Suze can go into more detail, we finalized the easement, and that is huge news for the Land Trust, huge news for the Hunewells, the Bridgeport Valley, all of our amazing goals. And yeah, it's been a long and involved process. And Kay, I know you can speak from your heart about all of this. So if you want to start it off, I pass the microphone to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Marie. I just want to thank everybody for coming, and we do have some other board members here. I'll just quick, on my screen, I'm seeing Bryn and Tony and Rick. And then we have staff. We've got Carissa and Heather and Suze. And I think I saw Kristen is joining us, but I don't see her right now. So Kristen, I think you're here too. And thanks everybody for joining us. And again, as Marie said, this is huge. I just want to stop for a sec and let's everybody jump up and down and clap and scream and yell, because we did it. It's completed, it's finished. And we'll talk more about what that looked like, what it was like, what the future is. But I just want to stop for a sec and talk. I wanted to feel that and make sure we were sharing in this accomplishment and this success. So two things going on, right? On one hand, there's the inspiration of protecting this beautiful, magnificent valley. It's one of California's only remaining high meadow, intact meadows in the ecosystems. It's been in the family, I believe there's 7 generations. There's 6 generations who have worked the ranch. They've owned it since the late 1860s when Napoleon Bonaparte Hunewill came. And I always want to remind people that without the family, this would not have been possible. The family, I mean, Suze and I will talk a little bit more about the technical aspects of all the challenges. And of course, my dog is barking. Hope you can't hear that. Gotta love Zoom. So we'll talk more about the technical aspects of it. And then on the other hand, I just want to make sure that while we're looking at the inspiration, we also understand some of the hard things. It's 4,100 acres that are protected now. It's the largest conservation easement that Eastern Sierra Land Trust has. And it was funded through 3 different sources. I'm sorry, is someone? Okay, it was funded through the federal program, NRCS, through sage grouse funding. So it's a part of our sage grouse work. California Wildlife Conservation Board, and also California Deer Association. I'm going to put myself on mute and go deal with 2 wild barking dogs and turn it over to Suze for a minute, and I'll be right back.
Thanks, Kay. Well, first, maybe Carissa, if you wouldn't mind putting a map up on the screen that shows where the property is located. I bet a lot of you know this place, but in case you don't, to give you a sense. So is the property in yellow in the center of this map? And this map also depicts other conservation easements that we've worked on in Bridgeport Valley and the surrounding region. You can see in green is the Shawnee Point Ranch that we closed a couple of years ago to the southeast. Cinnamon Meadows, which is at the far south end of the map, is in light blue. And then there's a few other projects you can see depicted. But you can kind of tell from this that Hunewill it's kind of the center of Bridgeport Valley. And if we had not been able to achieve this conservation easement, you know, it would always have been a difficult thing to have looked at the valley and thought, gosh, if only we could have worked on the core. But with the Hunewill decision to pursue a conservation easement, we were able to do this. So the other neat thing about this place, I always try to remind folks, it's not just the green Bridgeport meadow. You can see those properties off to the west. Those are inholdings in the National Forest that the landowners use as part of their grazing allotment on the National Forest lands. But those pieces, even though they look small in size, were actually core to the Hunewill operation, especially back at the beginning. Kay mentioned Napoleon Bonaparte Hunewill, who acquired the property in about 1860. Those pieces on the west side had timber mills and timber growth that allowed the Hunewills to sell timber to the town of Bodie. When Bodie was booming, you know, the Hunewills were instrumental in supporting it with lumber. And then later, when Mono Mills went into operation, Napoleon Bonaparte was a very savvy businessman. And what he figured out was it was cheaper to ship logs from Mono Mills across Mono Lake on the little rail line, you probably remember this, that went up to Bodie. And when he saw the writing was on the wall that it was going to be cheaper to deliver lumber from Mono Mills on the rail line than it was going to be for him to haul with oxen lumber from Buckeye Canyon all the way to Bodie, he pivoted quickly and supplied Bodie with beef instead of as much lumber. So then the meadows became central to that operation, of course. So this is a really neat project. It's a conservation easement is the structure, and I wanted to just explain a little bit what a conservation easement is in case any of you don't know. A conservation easement is a legal agreement between a landowner, like in this case, the Hunewills, and a holder, which in this case is the land trust, that basically permanently commits the property to certain limitations. In this case, the landowners willingly gave up the right to develop the property. They gave up the right to subdivide it. They gave up the right to mine it. And they chose all those specific restrictions they were willing to grant. The land trust then, you know, now that the easement has closed, the real work begins where we now have to monitor that easement and make sure that the landowners, not just these current landowners, but 100, 200, 300 years down the line, are abiding by the terms of the easement. And that's a very costly endeavor for any land trust or any holder of an easement because it's in perpetuity, which is a very hard thing to plan for. We write the easements as well as we can to make them workable for the landowners. We want them to be something the landowner can live with, but we also need them to be legally defensible so that if down the road there is some kind of a conflict, that we and the landowners can work together to resolve it within the confines of the conservation easement. The other neat thing Kay mentioned, this is an easement that was funded specifically through funding through the Farm Bill devoted to sage grouse conservation. So this is a really neat opportunity to use funding devoted to agricultural preservation for wildlife habitat at the same time. You probably already know this, but you know, cattle and sage grouse do really well together. The saying in the Sage Grouse Initiative is what's good for the bird is good for the herd. Cattle, livestock in this case, and horses to some degree need green growing meadows, in this case irrigated meadows in the Bridgeport Valley, obviously to grow for the livestock growth, but they also, those meadows provide incredible value for sage grouse. The chicks and the hens need that bright green growing meadow vegetation in the spring, not only to feed the chicks, the insects that the chicks are dependent on, but to hide. That there needs to be really important interstitial spaces between the meadow and the sagebrush habitat upslope. So it's been a really neat opportunity to work on both agricultural preservation and wildlife habitat with this project. This picture that Krista just brought up is one of the Buckeye parcels. This one you can actually kind of see the big meadows beside Buckeye Creek, which is in the center of the frame. Those meadows were used for grazing the oxen that Napoleon Bonaparte used to haul his lumber from Buckeye Canyon all the way to Bodie. And then you can see in the distance, this is the canyon that goes up. If you hike a long way, Kristen has actually done this very recently, up to the left-hand side of this frame, you'll get into Yosemite Park. It's actually a really interesting way to hike into the park up Buckeye Canyon. And because the Huneywells preceded the Forest Service in creation, the Hunewill Ranch was in place before the Forest Service was established, there's a jointly used trail through the property that the public's allowed to recreate on, non-motorized recreation. I think there's a few other photos, aren't there, Carissa? Yeah, I love this photo. This is a photo of Jeff Hunewill. I think he was kind of embarrassed by it because of his sunglasses. I thought his sunglasses were very stylish personally. But, you know, the family, it's a really neat opportunity to work on this project because the family is deeply involved in the management of the ranch and always has been. You know, you probably know other ranches in California where they've passed out of original homestead family ownership. Not this one. The Huneywells are still involved every day in managing the ranch. And that's been true since 1860. So it's kind of a neat opportunity to work with a family that has this much knowledge of the land and this many years of stewardship of the land. And I think there's one other photo that kind of shows the scale of the grazing operation. You know, this project was funded also for agricultural preservation because it is a core beef producing cattle ranch. And the landowners use also the property as a guest ranch operation where people come out to the property, including Tony and Cheryl. I know you've been out there, in Bryn, to come out and actually learn how to work cattle, learn how to rope, learn how to herd, learn how to work with dogs. It's a really neat opportunity for the public to learn a little bit about what it's like to work on a ranch. Those are kind of the core things I wanted to share, but I wanted to hear, I'm sure there are questions from you guys. If there are things you'd like to know about the project or the family, we're happy to answer some questions about the deal.
Yeah, just before we do that, I just want to ask everyone's forgiveness for that. I really apologize. Thanks, Suze, for picking that up sooner than you were planning on it. And I apologize for the interruption with the beasts. I just did want to say, if people are using the chat feature, feel free to open up the chat feature at the bottom, and you can type questions in here. Or I think with this small of a group, why don't we give it a shot, and hopefully no one else is going to have the craziness of barking dogs in the background. Why don't we unmute everybody, and if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, and we can delve into some of the details here. If there's too much background noise from someone, we'll probably mute you. Anyone got a question?
I don't. They're selling it. They just they're selling it.
I have a question. It's Robin.
Hi, Robin. Go ahead.
Hi,
I'm sorry. There was someone talking right before then. So Robin, why don't you go?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Robin, and then someone raise their hand and we'll find you next go around. Go ahead, Robin.
I was just wondering, why did it take so long?
That is an awesome.
Oh, Robin.
Process.
How much time do we have?
Yeah. Awesome question.
Well, I mean, Robin used to work for the Nature Conservancy, so I know you've done a few deals that have taken this long. In this particular case, you know, the landowners years and years ago did seek a conservation easement with what was then the American Land Conservancy. You might remember this group. It's the group that did the Hearst Ranch easement. That's their most
yes.
deal. So unfortunately, it didn't work out with American Land Conservancy, and sadly, American Land Conservancy eventually folded and had to transfer all of its easements to other parties. They did actually negotiate an easement directly north of Hunewill Ranch on the Centennial Dressler property. That easement ended up getting transferred to California Rangeland Trust. So they've worked in the valley before. It made sense that the Huneywells sought them out. But you know, it never worked out. And so the cool thing is that I think broke the ice for the family of this as a concept. So as they considered the easement, I think it became more real to them. And then when the deal fell apart, there were a few years there, I think, of the horse latitudes where they didn't decide to seek an easement. We were just growing. Tony and Cheryl were talking with the family, and eventually they did decide to come back and seek an easement with us. So I think it's been on the family's mind a very, very long time, but having that abbreviated negotiation with the other organization in the middle, I think, caused a lull. And then, for the last 6 years, as Marie mentioned, it's been, Hamilton style nonstop. I mean, I don't think there's been a day I haven't worked on this project to a greater or lesser degree in the last 6 years.
Amazing.
And I'll just say, there's, as some of you know, we have 3 different funding sources. We have the family, we have the land itself, which has title. So just think of this property that's been in this family for so many years. What is 160 plus, 165 years? There can be some title things that we have to work through that are just buried in there from 100 years ago or something. And so there were just all those little details. We were able to secure funding from the federal government right off the bat. And then we, with the California funding source, which was Wildlife Conservation Board, you get verbal approval first, you get in writing, but you don't go through the application process the same as you do for some funders. And they told us they had the funds. We had a delay due to another statewide issue. And then during that time, that funding entity dispersed the funds that they were holding for Hunewill. And so I went to Sacramento and laid out the maps of the whole valley and laid out the maps of all the work that we're doing in Bridgeport. And we were informed a couple of weeks later that they had secured additional funding for the state's portion. So all of that stuff sounds like, I can say it in 30 seconds. That was probably 2 years of work right there. I think I saw John. Yeah, John?
How much did the Huneywells get in remuneration for the conservation easement? I'm assuming that they got something.
They did. And, John, we try to always maintain landowner confidentiality on the transactional details. I'm sure you understand. I mean, there are times that landowners claim a gift for tax purposes. There are times that we seek out private funding, like from California Deer Association. But we try to always protect our landowners, their confidential business matters as much as we can.
Okay.
But yes, in this case, it was a purchased easement. You guys probably know many of our other easements, especially in the early days of the land trusts. Land trusts were donated conservation easements. We don't see that very much anymore. And that's partly just because, running these operations is very costly. And what landowners often do with the funding from sold conservation easements is turn around and buy other property to cement their agricultural operations. So we try to be careful about not sharing things that are really part of their business calculations. But the thing that is really neat about this project, as Kay mentioned, is we were able to get 3 distinct funding sources for it. And I should mention, California Deer Association, they're not a very large outfit. They're only a 1-state organization, but they have been essential here at Hunewill. They helped fund some work on the Shawnee Point Ranch. They've helped fund a lot of our Swall Meadows conservation easements, which are so core to the Round Valley herd. So without California Deer Association, even though their participation isn't as large as the big funding, the big public funding sources, it would almost be impossible for us to get these things done without them.
Well, the Huneywells,
for their help.
will the Huneywells still be able to make an income from any of the ranching operations?
Yeah, so most
Okay.
conservation easements, this one included, are structured to make sure the landowner can still make economic use of their land. In this case, through agricultural uses, through the guest ranch operation. The thing it does take away, though, in this case, is the right to make economic gains from subdivision,
Right,
housing
of course.
development, mining, commercial development, things of that nature.
Okay.
And in fact, I'll just quickly add, one of the goals of this is to, the goals of the funding entities is to ensure ongoing sustainable cattle ranching operation. That's part of the scoring is to get a grant is to make sure that this is a part of an overall sustainable ranching operation. So the goal is to keep it as working lands and not have it converted. Travis.
Hi.
Hi.
I am going to Hunewill next week from the 9th to the 16th to herd cattle out of Buckeye Canyon for the annual fall cattle gather where we bring the cattle back down to the meadow. So it's very exciting. It's about my 10th time to go to Hunewill with my husband or just now that I'm retired on my own. And each time I go, I talk to Jeff Hunewill and I say, when will the deal be closed? Because I want to be a volunteer for ESLT on the Hunewill Ranch. Basically, I'm trying to figure out a way to live on the Hunewill. I would like for you to think about ways that we can volunteer out there without getting in the way of the family and its operations. But I'm thinking, you know, to help the operations and do it under the, can I say it, under the cloak of ESLT volunteerism.
Well, go ahead, Suze. I think we're both going to
Well,
say
I was
the
just
same
going to
thing.
say that there may be opportunities, as there have been, for example, last summer on the Shawnee Point Ranch, there may be opportunities to bring stewardship work days out to the Hunewill property. Obviously, COVID has thrown a monkey wrench into that for this field season. But in future years, I appreciate that, Travis. I think it would be great to involve the public, if the Hunewills allow it, to come out and work on, you know, bird inventories and maybe some invasive plant removal and whatever else we could do that would help steward the property and benefit especially the wildlife habitat. So thanks, we'll keep you in mind.
And ask if I can bring my horse.
I'll just make a fine point here while we're talking. You know, ESLT is not a part of the operations of this. It's a complex. We hold the conservation easement over the land, and so our job is to now uphold the conservation values while the family manages the land. And we work in conjunction, but we're not actually doing the management. So Travis, I'm not sure how far we'll get on that, but we'll hold the thought. Any other questions?
Well, let me just say, if I could wish one thing for all of you on this call, it would be for you to have an opportunity to get to know people, the Hunewill family. Travis knows this, obviously. They are just amazing people. And I encourage you to sign up and go ride horses out there for 2 days to 5 or 6 days, or in some way get to know the Hunewill family. They're just wonderful people.
Okay.
Yes.
This has been a long journey, and I remember Jan Hunewill, I think it was Jan, spoke at one of the Lands and Legacies dinners. But now that it's all actually done, what have the family said about what this means to them? And maybe they're just kind of laconic folk and they're not inclined to talk about what this all means. But this is an extraordinary moment in the history of their family. And I wondered if they have shared thoughts with you about what it means to them in the legacy from Napoleon Bonaparte, what a name, and the implications for the future.
Thank you, Ruth. And everybody, I did not ask Ruth to say that. That was all. I didn't see this. You know, Ruth, some of it is, it's just settling in. This has been just a little over a week that we completed the transaction and that the funds were dispersed and the ink is drying. And it's still settling in layers, I think, for everybody. And Jeff will be speaking Thursday night at our paddle raise. And he's going to be talking at that time about what it means to the family. Yeah. So I think our paddle race starts, what time is it, Heather and Carissa? Is it 5 o'clock on Thursday? Yeah. So if you can join us on Thursday, the same link works. You can join us, and Jeff will be speaking about what this means and the process and what it looks like going forward. I mean, that's the thing, right? With the conservation easements, at least the only type that we do, they're in perpetuity. So as hard as this was to get it across this finish line and get to this moment where we can let the celebration and the realization of this permanent protection kind of sink in, well, pretty soon we're going to have to get to work to get out there and start monitoring that 4,000 acres. And that's not going to be easy. We've got a few more minutes. Are there any other questions? Oh, you guys are easy.
How do you connect with the Hunewill Ranch to go riding? What's their website or whatever? Do you know?
Well, so they have a website for the guest ranch operation, and if you search in Google for Hunewill Ranch, I'm sure it would be the first thing to come up. But they do have, it is a commercial operation, so the land trust always has to be careful. We're not trying to send business to a for-profit entity as a nonprofit entity. But the thing that is neat for us being able to support the conservation easement is the guest ranch element. That was created during the Great Depression when cattle receipts were so low that the Hunewill family felt they would lose the ranch. In other words, they could not sell enough beef to fund ownership of the property. And at that time, the family matriarch decided, well, what if we invite people in to have them learn a little bit about ranching life and see if they'll, pay for that service. And apparently they decided they were up for paying for it, because now it's been running ever since the Great Depression. So that's I think the reason that under the Farm Bill, we were allowed to fund this easement through the Sage-Grouse Initiative was the guest ranch is the thing that keeps the beef operation afloat in those years where hopefully never again, but just in case, if they experience something like an economic recession, the guest ranch can help keep the ranch afloat and keep it producing food. So that's the neat part about it, is the public gets to be involved in it. And the landowners have that flexibility in it. If you want to think of it this way, it's sort of agritourism, which is something that is being involved in a lot more agricultural easements these days than it used to be, because many farm and ranch owners see the value of having, oh gosh, hay rides or you pick pumpkin orchards or yurt. There's some in Idaho I knew about where it was yurt, horseback yurt trips where you'd walk on your horse from yurt to yurt. So this agritourism element can really help increase flexibility for agricultural producers to make sure that they remain economically viable.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. And also it offers people an opportunity to see what farming's all about. I mean, our farming groups are just dwindling, and a lot of them are quite 60 and above, the small farmers. And there are a lot of young people too that are coming to it, but just to let people see how it all happens. I think the whole agro-tourism business is really a bonus. Yeah. So that's neat. I'm going to reach out and check it out.
Yeah, it is a neat thing. And this is the last operation in all of Bridgeport Valley that still engages in a cattle drive at the end of every year. And that used to be something very common, where all the ranches that made up the Big Meadow would basically walk their cattle from Bridgeport to Nevada every year at the end of the year. but you can imagine it's a difficult thing to do. You know, they have to work with CHP, they have to shut down the highway, walk the cattle down the highway for the portion where there's no other place to walk. And then they walked onto BLM land in Nevada and walk on dirt cattle drive roads all the way back to Smith Valley. But it's dusty. It's not purely fun. I think it's a really interesting way to learn what it really takes to run a ranch. You know, it's hard work. And the cattle drive is neat because it's really celebrated by the town of Bridgeport every year, even though it's somewhat disruptive for a few hours. It's kind of a neat memory of what Bridgeport's history really was about.
Travis, did you have a quick question? We're about out of time.
I'm going to say that this year, unlike other years, Hunewill Ranch, because of COVID, is running at about half capacity. And so if people would like to go in September and October, I bet there is room for a reservation.
Yes, I'm just looking at their website, and the 2nd to the 6th of October, they have a full 4-day weekend, which has got available spaces.
Thank you.
Well, that was it for our session. If you've got any questions, please feel free. I mean, we can stay on for a few minutes if people want, but if not, please make sure you can send any of your emails or your questions to Susan and I, and we'll make sure we get back to you. Just quickly, a few little thank yous. Again, Tony and Cheryl, thank you so much for sponsoring Lands and Legacy this year. We also have Ruth and Roger who are on here, who are also sponsoring Lands and Legacy. Zoom. And so thank you so much, and I hope to see you. We've got another chat today at 4 o'clock, and then storytelling, sharing today at 5. So hopefully you guys can join us. We sent an email a bit ago with a reminder link and what's up today. And let us know if you've got any questions or any problems. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.